weddings for 10 to 12 years now, mostly in New York City. I'm a New Yorker and I've been working the downtown crowd and Brooklyn vibes, a little Long Island City. But I definitely have a clientele at this point in my career. I have a clientele that I consider also just a little bit more mid-range when it comes to budgets, but I work with a lot of very grounded couples and a lot of anti-briding rooms a bit too. I have a bit out of the box, why do we need flowers kind of people, but I also have a lot of couples that just truly love the beauty of bringing their friends and family together and having that be their main priority, and then us creating some fun stuff around that to make it their own and make it really intimate and about them as a couple and their love. But my background also a bit varied, but I started out doing nonprofit events and actually some concert production, and I shifted to weddings working for a firm called the Wedding Library for a bit. I also worked at Kaley's Papery, doing my wedding planning on a freelance level, and capturing a lot of my clients by designing their wedding invitations and then sliding my car. So that was fun for a few years. So I built a lot of business out, and then I also shifted to catering, and I went to a Brooklyn caterer and worked in that realm as well, doing a lot of their planning. And I found that to be incredibly helpful for me as a wedding planner in developing my own skill sets and understanding, how many waiters, how to order booze, how many forks I need, and really just the nitty-gritty of things that I felt like in the past I've been pointing fingers and directing, but instead now I actually was able to truly understand how to time and work and staff an event, and that was really valuable. And then when I got tired of that, doing the corporate stuff that was attached to my catering, I just liked my weddings, I decided to shift back to just being a planner for myself. And that's when I launched my own business, and I've been having a lot of fun with it ever since. So that's my journey. I would say a trend that I am excited to see gaining a little more momentum is a little bit of a cleaner aesthetic. So again, moving away from the whole rustic direction, but I do see a lot of clean and also a little industrial kind of direction where I'm doing a lot of weddings where I'm using like palm leaves instead, like a clean, crisp, bright greens and whites and things that really feel fresh and getting a lot more fresh. And if it's not fresh and clean in that direction, then I'm also seeing a bit of like edgy geometric, like the outfits being a little bit of a wow by being a little bit more angular or having kind of interesting patterns and things like that. Or my tablescapes aren't necessarily over the top and grand, but they are intentional angles, clean shapes, and I'm finding that to be really fun. The trends that I'm not as excited about right now, I have to, I'm trying to mimic that I do have to agree with the rustic element, and I'm happy to see that people are not requesting it as much, or if they are, they're doing it because they didn't realize that like they have more options that they can afford. They're like, well, I don't have a big budget, I guess I have to do a mason jar. And I was like, well, I actually was speaking to a potential client today who said that sentence, and I was like, well, if you're really into the mason jar, like, can we at least spray paint them all an interesting color and maybe add a stripe to it or something? I was like, but I don't know if I can handle just normal ones. We gotta give something to it to make it a little different. So I guess I agree that I would like to move away from that element, but I'm also a believer if a client really loves something and it's there, it's okay. I don't have to love it, so.
Viva, the do and the don't for the limo driver.
That's a good one.
Thank you. Do and the don't for limo driver.
What do you want to do?
Do is know where you're going, exactly where you're going, and if you have any questions, to please ask, so that you make sure you're confident in where you're going.
I know the don't. Don't touch the bride's dress. Don't ever touch the bride's dress. I know that one.
There you go.
There's one right here.
Yeah, so my favorite transportation company is representing the back row here. So a don't, yes, so maybe, unless she really needs it, but I would say a don't would be getting in the photos. Like, don't get in the way of the photos and make yourself kind of invisible.
Okay, so the one do.
Initially contacting me or any of us, they don't always even understand what a budget should be. They don't even know how much money they are going to spend on it. So what I try to do also is educate right off the bat. My first conversation is educating about budget because I'm trying to get a feel for myself if I'm the right fit, if they can afford me, if they can afford the vendors that I feel comfortable working with, but also to empower them to make decisions that they're confident about, that they're not going to regret or feel weird about, or by the end of the wedding they feel like, how did this get out of control? Like, those feelings are what makes a wedding stressful and what gives it a bad rep. So the first two things that I do is I make a to-do list for my clients, but I make a budget and I make it a really high priority, and I use Google Docs, and I have a low estimate, a high estimate, a revised estimate, an actual, and we're really filling in these numbers so that based on their conversations, like everyone else is saying, I'm guessing what I feel like we should prioritize. They tell me what's important to them, and I'm guessing about how much we should spend based on approximately how much I think money they are willing to spend. If they have no clue how much they want to spend, then I usually talk to them about venue and catering being the largest numbers that are really going to come through this wedding, and I talk to them about the percentage that should take up. And once I have that starting point where I say, okay, well, some of them have come to me already booking a venue, so there's already a certain percentage of their budget already taken up. If they haven't found the venue, then it's a really important element to make sure we can afford the wedding. So a lot of times, and depends on your clientele, but for my clientele, the cost of food and venue combined is typically 50 to 60% of my clients' budgets, about. And there's different ranges of foods and priority, like we're saying, we can always shift. But I find that's a helpful starting point, because then I say to them, hey, you just booked this stuff and you spent $60,000 on it. Does $120,000, $100,000 wedding sound about right to you? And hopefully they're saying yes. If they say no, I just spent $60,000 and I only have $70,000 for my wedding, then I'm like, this is not a healthy budget. I can help you, or good luck. You know. Reduce your guys' yeah.
So for the mother of the bride.
I would say do would be my advice to moms, and usually, or my advice to my couples in relation to their moms is often, for everybody, know who you are and know what makes you feel comfortable and confident, and plan for that. You are going to be yourself on the wedding day, and it's an exciting day, and you're a host, and you're surrounded by a lot of people you care about, and know what makes you feel confident and what makes you feel insecure, and let's plan to make you feel special and confident and beautiful, and let's plan around that. If that means I need to have a waiter walk around following you with martinis, I will do that. If that means you need make sure that you're sitting next to your sister to feel comfortable and confident on this day, then vocalize that, and I will help you feel comfortable and make sure your sister's by your side in all these important moments. Whatever it might be, know yourself and be honest about it, and let us help you have a wonderful time. Don't particularly with divorce. This is particular with divorce. I mean, there's a lot of complex elements to families at this point, and I just want everyone to feel comfortable and excited, their best self. And when they feel their best self, then their kids feel their best selves, because they don't have to be worried about anyone feeling negative on that day. The don't is, if you're not feeling your best self that day, to try and let a planner or someone assist you and not really put a burden on the couple that day. We'll try to prepare as best we can to make sure everything is perfect that day, but on the day, to let go, have a good time, and if anything's not exactly how you pictured or what you were expecting of your kids, to let it go, brush it off, or tell me and I'll try and help.
So this next section is I'm going to talk about a study, and I'm going to ask the panelists to respond to that. And I'll give them some time to think about this. And I'll give you more details before I ask you to respond. But the study showed that there's an inverse relationship between the money you spend on a wedding and the success of a marriage. That is, the study said the more money you spend, the greater the likelihood of divorce. Now, let me give you the details. It's not quite as simple as that. And then I want you to respond whether your experience supports that, or contradicts that, or if it's that's partially true, why is that true? I have my own ideas, which I'll share at the end because I read the study. So the study was done at Emory University in Atlanta, and they looked at 3,000 brides, which is not a huge number, but a significant number to be significant. And the question was, you know, the money they spent on the wedding versus the rate of divorce. And what they found was that using sort of the average of $5,000 to $10,000 on the wedding, which is the average for people, I realize you guys do weddings that are many, many zeros beyond that. They found that the people that spent 0 to 1K were 53% less likely to get divorced. People that spent 1 to 5K were 18% less likely to get divorced. People that spent $10 to $20,000 were 29% more likely to get divorced. And people above 20 were 46% more likely to get divorced. Now, the other element of the study, so it doesn't sound all bad, was there was a positive relationship between the number of guests at your wedding and the success of the marriage. So the greater the number of guests, the more likely the marriage will last. The greater amount you spend on that, the less likely. So one at a time, just tell me, you know, A, is that your experience? Have you seen that? Do you think that? Do you think I'm just making this up, like alternate facts? So let's start with the end page.
I have a question. What, especially the numbers that you were saying, was this
I
a
made them up.
specific region? Was this like, was it around Emory? Or yeah.
You know, I don't know that.
Okay,
Because
that's fine.
so you know, that'd be a good question. I've got to presume that it was because of the dollar amount. So I got to figure this is not New York City or San Francisco. But I don't know. So.
I personally have not witnessed that. I've had divorces and different price points. But I do think that there is a difference in, I feel like there are certain higher budget weddings where it's not being about the couple as much as it sometimes becomes more about the parents if they're paying for it. And that becomes more of like a showcase of our money kind of experience instead of something where the couple is as invested and working on it and doing it as a couple, like kind of like what Nancy is saying. So I do think that there might be a relationship in that sense. But I do think also it might be regional as well, where more and more of my couples in New York City, the couples are very involved in the planning process, and even if they are having some money from their family or whatnot, they are still a strong voice in their planning process and are older and have opinions and have a value for money and priorities. So I do think that affects it as well. They're involved. It's not just like this pageant that's happening to them and has nothing to do with the strength of their relationship or